Hi, my name is Kristen from Pathways to Healing, and I'm going to be sharing our second module from the Bridge to Safety collaboration. And we're going to be talking about safety for survivors and victims of domestic violence and or sexual assault. Our collaboration is called Bridge to Safety, and it's a collaboration between three organizations, Able South Carolina, Pathways to Healing, and the YWCA of the Upper Lowlands. And this project was funded through the U.S. Department of Justice's Office on Violence Against Women. And it seeks to create permanent change within all three of our organizations that result in accessible, safe, and effective services for people with disabilities who have been impacted by interpersonal violence. Together, representatives from all three of our organizations share our expertise and knowledge with each other so we can build capacity within all of our organizations. So again, the three organizations are Able South Carolina, and that's the disability agency, Pathways to Healing, which is my organization, and that's a rape crisis center, and we help survivors of sexual assault, and then the YWCA, who helps survivors of domestic violence. So let's start off with talking about what trauma is. Trauma is individual trauma that you get from an event or series of events or even circumstances, and they're experienced by somebody as physically or emotionally harmful or even life-threatening. And it can have lasting effects on your mental, social, and emotional or spiritual well-being. And we like to ask the question about why our services should be trauma informed. And of course, we want to make sure that our organizations are being helpful and kind to people. So people with and without disabilities who are seeking services for sexual assault or domestic violence have experienced trauma. So we always want to keep that in the back of our minds. And the point of this module is to talk about how we as organizations can be trauma informed when we're giving care to survivors. And some ways that we can do that is realizing the widespread impact of trauma and understanding the potential paths for recovery. So we're making sure that we know that people can be impacted by trauma and figuring out ways to help them. And we want to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of trauma in our clients, even our families and staff members and other people involved within the system. Because when we're able to recognize the signs and symptoms, we're able to get people help faster. And we want to fully integrate knowledge about trauma into our policies and procedures and practices. So it's not just something that we say we do, we're actually implementing it in everything we do. And we want to make sure that we're not re-traumatizing survivors who have already been through so much. We got this from the CDC. They worked with SAMHSA to create this, and we thought it was really great. And they talk about the 6 ways that you can be trauma informed and take that approach in your organization. And the first one is safety. We, of course, want to make sure that everybody feels safe, because we know that when you feel safe, you are more at ease to get the help that you need. We want everyone to know that we are trustworthy. We're going to keep their information confidential and that we truly care about them. Peer support is always important too. You know, there are family members, other staff members, other people in the community who have gone through the same thing that other survivors have gone through. So getting that support from them is important. Collaboration, that's what we're doing in the Bridge to Safety. We're communicating and learning from other organizations so we can be a help to other people, and also realizing that not just one person in your organization, but many people, staff members in your organization may have important things to share with survivors. And the last 2 are empowerment and cultural, historical, gender issues. And empowerment's always important because we want to make sure that survivors feel like they have the power back to make decisions for themselves. And sometimes we think we know what's best for people, but asking them what they need is always important. And we always want to move past cultural stereotypes and biases so we can celebrate and affirm the differences of people and recognize how everyone's needs may be different. So these are just 6 ways that we can work on being more trauma informed in our organizations. We also want to establish safety as a first step to provide trauma-informed care, and that's one of the things we learned on that sheet I shared just a second ago. Emotional safety, We sometimes just think of straight safety, but we have to think of the inside safety too, the emotional part of it. And emotional safety is feeling like you can let your guard down and be yourself. That's the easiest way to put it. And we want everybody to feel that way. We want them to feel safe to be open, especially when seeking services, because when you've already been through so much, a trauma, like we talked about, we want them to feel like our organization is a safe place for them to get the help that they need. And they may need accommodations to feel safe when they're seeking services too. They may need a little extra help, and we want to be ready to offer those accommodations. So let's talk about some things that make our organizations emotionally safe. Of course, we want people to feel heard and listened to. I think we all want to feel that way. We want to make sure that people are really hearing what we need. We want people to feel welcome in our agency, a warm welcome when they come in the front door. People can have open discussions without shame. I think that we all like to share our feelings and not feel embarrassed about how we're feeling. People feeling believed is very important, especially with survivors, because a lot of people don't believe what happened to them. So making sure that you say things to them like, I believe you, and I'm so sorry that you went through this. People can feel that they can make an impact and affect change, because sometimes when you've gone through something, you feel like, there's no hope. And so we want to make them feel like they can make an impact and affect change. And people feel they can admit to mistakes. That's a big thing. You feel comfortable if you can admit when something it hasn't been done exactly the way you wanted to do it. People have opportunity to speak or share their story. This can also be helpful for the peer support part that we talked about before, sharing what you've gone through, and it may be a connection for somebody else who's also gone through the same thing. And when you know what to expect, you can also feel safe. People also feel empowered and in control when they feel safe. And that's where we want to get as an organization. We want to treat them with respect and make sure that they're feeling validated and valued. We also want to remember that people's privacy is respected. This is a big deal to people who have already had something taken from them. And so we want to make them aware that their information isn't going to be shared without consent from them. Trust goes both ways between staff and clients and consumers. We want to make sure that we are doing what we're preaching. And finally, people can be honest without the fear of judgment, because sometimes we're feeling a certain way and we want to be able to express that. And if there's no judgment in the organization that you're talking to, it will make people feel safe. So we're going to move on to what may not make somebody feel emotionally safe. And of course, we do not want to do these things in our organization. So let's talk about these for a minute. We don't want people to feel like they are unheard or ignored. People feel unwelcome and won't return for help when they need it. If you don't feel welcome, you're not going to come back, right? So we don't want to be that organization who makes people feel that way. We don't want people to be afraid and feel like we aren't trustworthy. We don't want people to feel isolated or that they're not believed or even doubted. And people feel they have to hide their mistakes or can't try new things when they aren't emotionally safe. And we don't ever want somebody to feel that way. They feel silenced or shamed when they're not emotionally safe, and people are easily frustrated and things escalate quickly. So when you are feeling all of these things from an organization who is trying to help you, you're going to get so frustrated and it is going to escalate quickly, because you're going to get angry and you're going to want to leave fast. So we want to make sure that we're not doing these things. And also we want to remember that we don't need to minimize people's experiences, and we want to address people properly, and we don't want people to feel powerless and out of control, and we don't want to dehumanize people, and we want to we don't want to look at people as their problems and for what they went through, and we want to look at them as a person, as a whole. And people look for hidden meanings or potential threats when they don't feel emotionally safe. So we want to make sure that we're having clear messaging and that is kind and welcoming and accessible. Staff, employees, and people receiving services should all feel physically and emotionally safe. And we, all three organizations, fully agree on this comment. We had a safety review tool that came from the Triumph of Omaha's guide. They created it, and it talks about questions that you can ask to evaluate your space to make sure that it's emotionally safe. And the tool works with accessibility review to make sure that the spaces are both safe and accessible. So it's a tool that you can use that we just kind of borrowed from them. And you follow the steps to eliminate the barriers to make sure things are emotionally safe after you do the review. And you can use the tool to make sure that everything is emotionally safe for everyone who enters the door of your agency. And that includes not only your survivors and your guests, but also your staff members that you work with too. We're going to talk a little bit about how to offer emotional support and safety. So when we did this project, we did a lot of focus groups, and so we got a lot of feedback, and you'll see some of the quotes that we got from some survivors. And one of the things they mentioned is having a welcoming environment, because a lot of people say when they go in and somebody's kind to them, it makes them feel comfortable to open up. And so that's really important to all of us, that we make sure that our first contact people are warm and kind. We want to respect the whole person, offer consistency and kindness, making sure that we are looking at them as a person and who they are and treating them with respect, and making sure that they feel heard, and talking to them, genuinely asking them questions and connecting. And we need to remember that people have different strengths and needs that come from unique experiences. So somebody may have experienced the same thing as somebody else, but they have different experiences and even feelings about the whole situation. So we need to keep that in mind too. And always seek to improve lives by promoting safety and choice. So making sure that we want to help them move forward with healing and improve their lives. So we need to make sure that they're safe, and also listen to what they are asking us and telling us that their needs are. This is one of the quotes that I talked about before. This is from a person with a disability, and they said, "Sometimes I feel like I need more to feel safe, and people asking me what I need to feel safe automatically makes me feel safer." So this person was just letting us know that if we right off the bat ask them, "Hey, what do you need to make you feel more safe?" or what kind of accommodations do you need to make you feel safe when you come into our office? This makes them feel more safe, and like we're thinking about them and caring about them ahead of time. So we know from the Department of Justice Disability Sexual Assault statistics that people with disabilities are victimized at a rate 3 times higher than the rest of the population. So again, we know that if people with disabilities are victimized at a rate 3 times higher, that we want to make sure that our agencies are accessible and understand our information is understandable. So we are making sure that they know that they are cared about and taken care of before they come in with their needs. We want to make sure that survivors and victims, consumers feel welcome and important. Some ways that you can make sure that your environment at your organization is welcoming is you can make sure that it's well lit. You know, some survivors, if they come after it's gotten dark, they may be nervous to come to your office. So making sure that it's well lit and you have lights around your entrances and exits. We want to make sure that the entrances and exits are easy to find. I know at our location, we don't have signage because we want to stay confidential, but we will give explicit directions when we make contact with the survivor to let them know exactly where we're located and exactly what door and where to park and things like that. Calming and comforting colors are also important, making sure that there's no clutter around that may trip somebody up. Odor-free is something new that some people are doing, having no perfumes or air fresheners, because sometimes that can affect people. And making sure that your staff always smiles to greet people, and comfortable temperatures, because I know if you're like me, you don't like to be hot or freezing. So making sure that it's comfortable in the office. You can also make people feel welcome by ensuring the space is safe, by making sure that the doors are locked. So not anybody can just walk in at any time. Maybe even having security cameras so you can go back and look at footage if you need to, and having clearly marked entrances and exits so people know how to get out fast if they need to, or if they're feeling uncomfortable, they can leave. Having a way to track who is in the building. This can be important too if you need to figure out who is in the building or may still be in the building if there's an emergency, and ensuring there's a way for people to call for help. I know in one of the organizations, they have call buttons or just a way to let people know that they can call out for somebody and a staff member will assist them if they need it. Outlining check-in procedures for clients and visitors. This was also important to some of the people we interviewed because sometimes when you go into a new location, you're unsure of what's expected of you and what you're going to have to do when you get there. So thoroughly explaining your intake process. When you walk in the door, you're going to be welcomed by so-and-so, and then they're going to give you some paperwork. And then after you fill out the paperwork, you're going to give it to this person, and then they'll walk you back to where you need to go. So just being clear about exactly everything that they're going to have to do. And then finally, ensuring people cannot hear personal conversations through doors and windows. Because again, if you're talking to people about their things that they've gone through and their traumas, they don't want to feel like somebody else may be listening or eavesdropping. So one thing that we have at Pathways is we each have a sound machine outside of our door. And whenever we have a session with a client, we turn the sound machine on before we start. Respect is always important. We want to respect the whole person by supporting their mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being. I think we all need this, and it makes people feel a lot more comfortable, especially when we recognize that people with disabilities experience their disability different than other people. We can assume that somebody feels a certain way, or we can think, oh, they have the same disability I do, but they may have a totally different experience than you may have. So remembering that when you're helping. And then respect what works for that person as an individual. Some examples of showing individual respect include accommodations, maybe like email reminders for a meeting if they may have a hard time remembering things, or rearranging the room if things may be in the way, or lowering lights so someone feels safer to meet there. And those are just some examples of things that you can do. We always want to offer them kindness and take the time to listen. This is one of the most important things that you can do, because when you're kind to somebody, it goes a long way. We want clients to feel safe and have a choice and a voice in how we can help them. Again, I talked about before how we can assume if we're helpers, we want to just help right away, but sometimes it's more helpful to say, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? The core of your services should be self-determination. Clients have a right to make their own choices about their own lives, so we always want to include them in decision-making. Two areas where we help foster an environment of emotional safety are first contact and in our services. So first contact, we talked about, in the welcoming part, staff greeting clients and making them feel welcome right away, being kind, asking them if they need anything, making sure that they notice the noise machines throughout the office, and waiting areas being nice and decorated with neutral colors is always great. This is another quote we had from a person with a disability, and they said frontline staff need to be trained. First impressions matter. So this person, if I remember correctly, they talked about how they came and it wasn't a great experience, and the person didn't even know how to answer their questions, and it made them feel uncomfortable, and they ended up not even going back. So we don't want that in any of our organizations. So we're going to go through some scenarios, and this slide has a photo of a darker background and then two wooden dice that say what if. And the scenario says a client comes in the office and starts to feel overwhelmed sitting by other clients. They come up to the front desk to tell you they aren't ready and want to leave. What would you do? So this is a good example. Some people do feel overwhelmed and they get nervous when a lot of other people are around them. And so this is good to think about ahead of time and maybe put it in your policy, but even also making a space for people who may feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable. So we always say that it's good to acknowledge people's feelings. So maybe saying something like, I am so sorry that you're feeling this way. We actually have a place where you can go and sit and wait until your appointment time. And so this is great, but only great if you have a space. So this is something we talked about is in our guide is talking about having a space where we can take clients if we need to, so they can feel more comfortable. All right, first contact safety. We want to make sure that all offices are accessible. We want to make sure that anybody can get through the area. Someone with a white cane, a wheelchair, anything, making sure that it's always accessible, and making sure that the offices are well lit and all outside doors to the office are locked for safety, and that all accessible restrooms are available at all locations. This person's quote said, "I like knowing layouts." And this is important, especially with people with may have low vision or trouble seeing because they need to know if something may be in the way. So maybe walking somebody through and say, "Hey, we're going to take a left right here, but there's a water fountain on the right, so I just want to let you know that." So letting people know ahead of time, or letting them know, "Hey, we're going to come up here and we're going to take a left and then a right, and then my office is going to be on the left." So again, just letting them know where they're going. We have another scenario, and it's the same picture with the wooden dice that say, "What if?" And the question reads, "A person calls and states that they are the client's mother and need to know what time their family member's appointment is. How do you respond, and what are your next steps?" Now, we kind of touched on this a little bit a minute ago. You may know that the client tells their mother everything and that they talk to their mom, and they may have said, "Mom, will you call and ask for the information?" But we don't know that. So in order for us to be confidential and to stick with our policies, we would again say that we can't confirm or deny that we see this person. And you can even say something like, if you feel like the person you are calling about would like us to speak to you, you would have to call them and request that they sign a release of information for us to speak to you. So that can be hard sometimes because you can feel like you're maybe being rude, especially if it's a family member. But again, the most important thing is to keep the confidentiality of the survivor, and also that will remind them that we care about it and that we are keeping them safe. So with our services, kindness is very important. So we can do that by making sure that clients are listened to and shown respect, that we believe them, and that they know what to expect because every step is explained. So I tend to do that when I answer the phone for our clients, because I know I'm the same way. When I go to a doctor or to a new office, I want to know where it is, where the desk is, who I'm going to speak with. Am I going to have to fill out paperwork? Do I need to bring anything with me? And that makes everybody feel a little bit more comfortable. And we want to make sure that the clients know that they can be honest and that we're not going to judge how they feel, and they can share their needs and how they're feeling. This quote from a person with a disability says, "A lot of times service providers can't understand what I'm saying over the phone, and they are really rude about it." This can be hard because sometimes it is very hard to understand people on the phone. And so we want to always make sure that we are operating in kindness and saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry, I just cannot understand what you're saying. Would you mind repeating?" Or maybe it's something where we need to get an interpreter and do some kind of accommodation. So it can be frustrating when somebody doesn't understand you, but when you're kind, it softens it. So we always want to be kind at our organizations. Another scenario with the same picture with the two dice that say, "What if?" It says, "During a session or on a hotline call, a client keeps saying, 'It was my fault. I feel ashamed. I shouldn't have gone over to their house.'" And it's asking how you would respond. This can be very hard because a lot of survivors feel this way, and they feel like something they may have done may have affected what the outcome was of what happened to them. And it's always good to remind people that it wasn't their fault. And I know, especially with sexual assault is somebody using their power and control to take something from somebody that is not theirs. And some people just need to hear that. Like, it is not anything that you did that could have prevented or stopped this person. It's they using their power and control over you, and it's not right. And so again, just saying, "I believe you, and you did nothing wrong." And sometimes you have to say that multiple times to people before they start to believe it. So our services need to be strength-based, and we want to make sure that our client strengths are recognized and highlighted by clinicians. So if we see that they're good at something, or that they're growing in an area that they've been working on for a long time, we want to bring that to their attention and say, look where you were when you first came in, and look how much you've grown, and how great is that. And they start to feel hope and feel encouraged, and they see that you're recognizing the things that they're doing well. And they may not have anybody in their life who's doing that for them, so it can be a really important way for you to connect with them also. And we want to make sure that their unique experience experiences are acknowledged, because we all have different experiences and some people have been through a lot. And so acknowledging what they've been through, even sometimes saying like, that sounds like a lot that you've been through, means a lot to them, because they realize that they're not crazy and they've been feeling overwhelmed. And for somebody else to recognize that they've been through a lot is a big deal. We also want to make sure that our staff is encouraging clients to feel empowered by their ability to move forward in their experiences. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the tools, but then we're also encouraging them to use them on their own and to grow and move forward. This quote says, "It made me feel comfortable when someone said, 'I believe you.'" This is one of the things we say at Pathways all the time is, "I believe you," because as we know, a lot of survivors aren't believed, and that's unfortunate, and we want to change that. So believing somebody who's coming to you and saying that they have been harmed or been through a trauma is very important. This next scenario with the same picture says, during each session, the client states they feel worthless and that their identity is now just the assault. How would you respond to that? So this can also be hard because you can't change the way somebody feels, right? So you need to start focusing on them as a person and maybe talking to them about the things that they're good at or the things that they find enjoyment in, and start focusing on things like that. I also talk to people in sessions and encourage them to pull out the negative thoughts and shove good ones in. So just reminding them that they were a person even before the assault, and they were good at things and great at things and special. And this assault doesn't change those good things in them. We want to make sure that our services are accessible, of course. And so we want them to know that their needs are important to us. And if they need accommodations, we're happy to do that. We need to let them know that some accommodations may take a little bit longer. So if it's something we can do right away, of course, we're going to do it. But if it's something that may take a few days, we want to manage those expectations and let them know that it may take a little bit, or we may have to get some things approved or move things around. Of course, every attempt is made to make each service accessible to the best of our ability. So we're going to go as far as we can to make sure that things are accessible. We also, all three of our agencies, we provide visual or plain language list of accommodations. We have a list of ways that we can help, but it's also in 14 size font and plain language, so people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will be able to understand it. And we use appropriate language. So not everybody understands everything at the same level. So it's good to use appropriate language when you need to, and plain language is also a good idea. This person with a disability said, "Provider speaking slow, clearly, and more than once. My brain will absorb it if it's slow and clear." And I love this because I love that they were so clear on exactly how they needed things. And I was on a webinar one time, and there was a person with an intellectual or developmental disability, and they interrupted the whole webinar that had a lot of people on. They're like, "I don't understand what you're saying. I feel left out, and you're using big words that I don't get." And it just made me realize that, in school, we're taught to use big words and big vocabulary, but it leaves people out. So talking in plain language and in a slow way that people can understand helps them feel included, but also helps them understand. And that's especially important in your organization, because if you're explaining ways that they can grow and heal, and you're talking to them about things that they need to be able to understand it in order so that they can choose what they need that will best help them. This scenario says a client comes in for their first session and you realize that they cannot read the forms and they don't speak English as good as you thought that they did. What do you do? Yes, this can be hard because, well, when you hand somebody a form, you can kind of tell when they're struggling, because they may just be sitting there and squinting or thinking, and then they're not really writing anything down or filling the form out. So that's when we will say to them, "Would you like us to help you fill this out? Would you like someone to read this to you?" Just giving options, or even asking, "How can I help you fill out this form?" So you're not assuming what they need. And then if they don't speak English as good as you thought that they did, then that would be a time that you could get someone who speaks Spanish in your agency, if it's Spanish, whatever language it is, or set up another time for them to come in where you might have an interpreter. We have another scenario, and again, it's the same picture with the two wooden dice that say, what if? And the question says, a client mentions that a space in your office isn't accessible to them. What should your first step be? And of course, we always want to apologize, because if something isn't accessible for someone, we don't want them to feel like they weren't thought about. And so we want to remove all the barriers that we can. So the first thing that we always encourage everybody to do is apologize that it wasn't accessible. And if you can move it right away, move it right away. And if it's something that maybe you need more time to do, you could say something like, I'm so sorry, this was in the way. I will make sure it is not here next time. So yeah, just taking care of the needs of your clients. All right, we want to make sure that our services respect people and they keep their information confidential. So secure check-ins in for clients, no names used. So I know that when people come to Pathways, we won't say, hey, what's your name? We'll say, hi, who are you here to see today? So they aren't saying their name in front of other survivors in the waiting room. And the client forms and information are never left on anybody's desk, because we don't want somebody walking through to maybe see who has been to our office to get services. And we always let clients choose where they want to sit. And this is important because some people may not feel comfortable with their back to the wall or back to the door. So we sometimes just give multiple choices, like, hey, would you like to sit here on the couch or on the chair? And it also gives them that choice that we were talking about, to choose what is most comfortable for them. We always make sure that sound machines are on during the sessions, the entire sessions, and that also lets them know that you care about the information that they're sharing and that you don't want anybody else to hear it also. And we want to make sure that we're not giving information out about clients without a release of information. At Pathways, if somebody calls and asks about a client that we serve, we always say we can't confirm or deny that we see this person, because we are not going to share any information unless the client has specifically signed a release saying that we can talk to them. And that's one of our policies too. This quote says, I like having the door shut or having something to muffle the extra noise. And this just goes to show that people do have feelings about confidentiality and what makes them feel safe and comfortable in talking to you. So sometimes even asking the question, hey, what can I do to make you more comfortable during this session? Or even saying, when you walk in the door with a client, turning on the sound machine and saying, hey, I'm just going to turn this on. We do this with everybody to make sure that what we talk about is confidential. This grant was supported and awarded by the Office of Violence Against Women, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this publication program exhibition are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women. The resources that we got were the APA article on trauma and the SAMHSA concept of trauma and guidance for a trauma-informed approach.